it already and just did it in PDF. That's cool.
Yeah, okay, absolutely, yeah. As long as you turn in, we can tell what question you're answering and it's typed. Smoke what you got.
I got it. Sorry. We got it wrong.
We won't use clickers at the beginning of class, but we will use it at the end for reasons you'll see soon. So you will won't have them handy, you'll take them out. And no, I'll remind you again, but you'll be rewarded for attendance if you have to answer the last question. Only the last question, you'll see why. Part of the learning. Anything else to say about announcements? Anything else?
On the copy and pasting to the Word document, I tried that and it doesn't work. Like,
Doesn't work for you?
Yes, and it makes it too big to fit me.
Does it let you select the text?
Yeah, but it like, it'll let you do that, but it like, it won't, it cuts off part of the word.
Email me if you continue to have problems, and I'll send you a document. Here's what we're going to do today. I don't want you to take notes today. I want you to sit back and listen. Everything that we're doing now that you need to be responsible for, we're going to have a detailed homeworks next week. You've got a lot going on this week, but next week, those homeworks will tell you exactly what you'll need to know from the material we're discussing today. Today we're staying on these really big picture things, and it just really attracts everything about to take notes on this. Everything we need is in a video or in the article, in a short article. Now, I want to introduce what we're doing today by showing something that would look to be irrelevant. This is a video of fire ants. When a big flood comes, it'll wash away the fire ants' home. And the only way a fire ant colony can stay together is if they band together and make a raft. This is a fire ant raft. These are just ants holding on to one another. And just holding on to one another makes them fluent. And then they just let the water take them. Wherever the water wants to, they're layback ants. And when they hit something, the first ants that hit a solid substance, they grab onto it and they hold onto it, let the people in the back start walking up. And slowly, the raft embarks and they create a new colony. And they'll do this over and over. They'll travel in the water for days. And when I first saw this, I thought it was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life. I thought it was beautiful. If I wasn't pumped full of testosterone, I might have cried a little. And even if I did, I would never admit it in front of Muscle Man because he might come take my lunch money. And one thing I liked about that is that it was just a great picture of social harmony. You have this society of ants, this one colony, and they work together so well. And you look at this and sometimes you wonder, why can't humans work this well together? Now granted, fire ants, they do wage constant war on each other and other ants and stuff. But within the colony, they seem to get along very well. And an economist looks at that and thinks, what can we do to make a human society have as much harmony as this, work together so well? And well, there's two things to know about this raft. One is that obviously the queen bee, queen ant, is not in the middle of the raft shouting answers. There is a queen, but it's not like a human human monarch. The queen doesn't tell other people what to do. She just sits back, eats something else, has lots of babies, and so on. And so, but what's coordinating this? Obviously, it takes a lot of coordination to make this raft, and what's doing it? Well, there's nobody in charge. No one thing doing it. The ants, and they're very simple creatures in many ways. They just look at what's going on in the raft, and they kind of instantly know their place within the raft. So and each ant doesn't need to worry about what the other ants doing. They don't need to gossip about each other, whether so-and-so is slacking off. Each does its own thing. It sees where it needs to be, and it just goes there. And in many ways, our human society is like that. We don't have anybody in charge of the economy. And when people do get in charge of an economy, they only wreck it. Most everything we produce and consume, is a common theme, comes from lots of people, buyers and sellers, engaging in voluntary interactions with each other, complete freedom, everybody's doing what they're wanting, not even knowing what anybody else is doing, and somehow, in the end, we end up pretty well. I don't need to worry about what y'all are going to do in life. Y'all will do something. Markets will make it such that you take a job in a place that utilizes your skills the best and will make it such that you contribute to society. I don't worry about that. I don't worry about where my food's coming from. I have no idea who makes my food. I'm going to need gas on the ride home. The light's already on. I don't even ever worry about whether the gas station will have gas. It always has gas. I don't worry about whether they're going to gouge me there. They always have a low price, or at least a very competitive price. So much in the economy that we just don't worry about, we don't think about, we don't need to, and yet we're still okay. At the same time, every colony, every society has to operate through some sort of coercion. And there is some coercion that goes on here. When I'm thinking the metaphor for us is coercion, morality. You not want to do things that other people think are immoral. You not want to do things your priest says is sinful. You not want to do things that are against the law. When the ants try to figure out their best place on the raft, what they do is they start walking around. And when they reach the edge of the raft, what often happens is another ant that's on the edge reaches up and grabs the ant and pulls it down with it. It's kind of like saying, hey, you come right here. You're right there. I can see you. There's nobody next to me. Get here. Come right here. They pull the ant down, hold it down. The ant then voluntarily grasps on to the raft and so on. So there is a bit of coercion. Something that's evolved, something that needs to happen. And in any human society, there's going to have to be some sort of coercion. You need law and order. That's coercion. Many of you in your papers seen the need to regulate firms because of pollution, things like that. And we're going to look at something to do in this class, coercion, that I think will make everybody happier in class, make things better off. But before we get there, I want to talk about the freedom part of achieving harmony. Thank you for what you did on, I think it was homework 13, where you entered an input into the production of a good. We ended up, I really liked the way it ended up. This is retail beef. That's restaurant tortillas. And we knew that it would look something like this because for any good, there's tons of inputs that go into making tortillas. And I really appreciate, a lot of you did some really good web research and found a specific input that went in there. Socialist economies, when they think about how are we going to get restaurant tortillas or retail beef, they look at this from a group of people high in a communist party, and they say, okay, how do we manage this? I mean, look at this. Imagine you trying to manage all this. For us to have restaurant tortillas, not only to have enough, but to have them produced them at a reasonable cost, everything here has to work right. Every input has to be ready and available when it's needed, on down the line. It has to be there, and it has to do its job right. And you can imagine how hard that is to do. And what the socialist economists would do, they would try to do things, okay, let's set quotas. This input firm needs to produce this much each month. The firm under that has to produce this much each month, and so on and so on. So businesses would just be told how much they need to produce. And if it was hard to do, they just made a really crappy version of that. And then you go and get the inputs, and yeah, the quantity's there, but it's crap. You can't make tortillas out of it. It's really hard to do. Now, if you're a manager of a food processing firm that makes restaurant tortillas, this probably doesn't overwhelm you. It is true, for you to get all the ingredients for restaurant tortillas or to make retail beef, everything has to work right. All these other inputs have to do their job. Everybody else has to do their job for you to have the inputs to make restaurant tortillas or retail beef. And let me just zero in on something, just to highlight this. Let me go back to retail beef, and if someone's going to have retail beef, they want to make sure that on down the line, way down at the bottom, the companies that supply the silverware companies with the raw materials that farmers use to eat the food, which the farmers get energy from to work, and the farmers who run the equipment plant the seed, and then the seed goes in the crops, and the crops go into blah, 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 and finally we come up here, we get it closer, and get closer to be, so yeah, it is true that we need silverware to have retail beef attention. And this would overwhelm someone if they thought they had to be in charge of this or make everything work. A society does have to coordinate this, right? I mean, there does need to be coordination. But the good thing is this coordination does happen. It happens very well. And it does it kind of force. We don't need to think too much about it. The person making restaurant tortillas, the person making retail beef, they don't need to worry about the rest of the world. All they need to worry about is the prices of the inputs that they buy. That's it. They just look at prices, they figure out how to make the most money for themselves, and that's their job. They can concentrate on doing what they do best because market prices do all the coordinating, for the most part. Market prices coordinate everything here to make the tortillas. And I would stand and explain this a little better, but I think there's a video that does it better, so I'm going to show it.
For no one with perfect information how much something should cost. It's a trick question. Suppose there are two farmers, Al Truis and Mo Cash for me. Each of them has 500 acres of land that could grow either corn or soybeans. Suppose I ask what their plans are. Both of them text back, I don't know. Now suppose we borrowed a crystal ball from some genie, and we know everything. Among the things the crystal ball can tell us are that Brazil has had a terrible summer with drought, then late floods that wiped out 40% of their soybean crop. It also tells us that new uses for soybean curd have pushed up consumer demand for soy paste all over Asia. Meanwhile, corn crop yields have hit record highs all over the world, and at the same time, several countries ended their corn-based ethanol programs, leading to an extraordinary corn surplus. Our first farmer, Al, has to decide what to plant. Al never wanted anything for himself. All he cares about was doing what was best for all of humanity. He does research, trying to decide which crop will be better for humanity as a whole. But it's hard for Al to determine what information is most relevant, because he doesn't trust price information, and the knowledge that he needs is too dispersed, too specific, and too hard to learn. Now, Al knows a lot, but still not enough. He's stuck at I don't know. So he makes a guess, plants corn. Al's put a tremendous amount of time and resources into his research instead of focusing on what he's good at, running a farm. As a result, he doesn't get much corn planted, has a hard time selling the corn he does produce. He has to sell for very little, and he ends up bankrupt. Let's look at Mo's experience. Since he cares only about profits, he focuses on prices. In early February, the price of corn futures falls sharply. But soy futures indicate that prices for soy delivered in August should be excellent. Why did this happen? Mo has no idea, and he couldn't possibly care less. Mo sells a large soy futures contract to lock in the high price and plant soy on every square inch of land that he owns. It's a selfish bet, one that'll make Mo a lot of money. Instead of trying to be an expert in all the disparate subjects he'd need to master, to have perfect information about the marketplace, he just focused time and resources on running his farm. And the only other information he used was prices. He produced a lot of soybeans and did well for himself. Which of the two did the right thing, the better thing for society? What would the genie with the crystal ball have told us? The genie would have looked at the glut of corn and the shortage of soy that made it so valuable and told us what people need is more soy. But of course, there's no such thing as genies in the real world. Information is too dispersed, too complicated to solve the IDK problem through research. There's just too much to know. Fortunately, farmers don't need a crystal ball because prices do exactly what we were hoping that the genie would do. Farmers don't need to know why a price is high or low. And in fact, no single person could possibly explain it fully. But by growing the crop that produces the greater profit, farmers can produce the crop that solves the shortage, meets the demand, and satisfies the requirements of innovation. It's impossible to attain perfect information about the entire marketplace, which is changing all the time. Prices are a way of condensing all that information into one easily understood signal, almost like magic. Keep learning, liberty. Click on one of them.
Now, I don't want you to see that and think what economists are trying to say is that the only thing you should care about is yourself. All you should do is go out and try to make the most money you can. And many times just trying to make more money actually does do a lot of good for people. But there are instances where we need to not just think of ourselves, but think about what's best for the group as a whole. And try to form some collective action to right wrongs. I'm only like 20 years older than you, but when I was young, people were still just throwing stuff out the cars, littering anywhere. Litter was just something you didn't care about. It was almost funny, you know. And when people started putting up signs that said "Don't litter," it was funny. But then people started becoming aware of this problem. That me as an individual, it's much easier for me to throw stuff out the window. It's very hard to clean it up. But when everybody does that, when everybody does what's best for themselves, we end up with a very fascist place. You look around, there's nothing but Walmart bags everywhere. And so one way we did collective action to try to right this wrong. There was some government stuff, but it was mostly a change in our culture. Now, you would never go through campus and just throw something on the ground. People would look at you. People would probably say something. And it's something you want to do. It's coercive in a way. People are telling you how to behave, society is. But in the end, you want to be a good person. You want to be looked at as nice. And of course, there are instances when individual firms pollute. We recognize that lots of people pollute, so we say we need big government to come in and regulate some stuff. So what I want to do now is start thinking about when do we want to think like this, let me just look at prices and do what's best for me. And when we actually do want to step back and act like altruists and say what's best for everybody. Now, I'm going to use an example in this class, something in this class. I think it'll be a very salient example, something that'll stick with you and help you understand other things that we're going to study called common resources and public goods. I think something happens at the end of this class that nobody likes. Towards the end of this class, and I rarely go the entire class. I don't want to just fill up an extra 3 minutes just because I have to. If I have my stuff done, I like to go. Well, you've gotten used to that. So you know we're probably going to get out, 118, 115. So when it hits 113, you're starting to get ready. So now we really back things up. And now it's 110, I start saying a few things, and people start packing their bags. And then it makes a lot of noise. Nobody can hear what I'm trying to say. I plead with you to try to stop. You don't listen to me. People start saying things to each other. I don't think anybody actually likes that. Now, it was perfectly rational. I understand exactly why it happens. It's the same reason why sometimes you have to stand up for long hours at a football game, even if everybody would rather sit down. What happens, you think, I'm an individual. And there's this kind of good, we call it a public good, called silence. Ability to hear. The master orator, Dr. Noah. It's a good. And, well, we all kind of own it collectively, and we can't deny it to each other. And what happens is this, when you have this kind of public good thing, is me as an individual, if I think it's getting close to time to end class, I can just start reaching down, and I can just just a little bit, Zip. Won't make much of a noise. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Just one person, all right? One person has almost no impact on the total volume in a class of 170 students. And you're ready to go. You're probably just ready to move. You've been sitting down so long. So you think there's a big benefit to me just being able to move, start packing. I want to get out here for everybody else. And even though I don't want the whole classroom to get loud, I'm not responsible for the whole classroom. I'm one person. And so it makes sense for people to start packing it back. Individually, as an individual, it's perfectly rational and not even bad. It's not even rude for one individual, because as one individual, you're not doing much at all. But when everybody does it at the same time, I don't think anybody likes it. I heard last time someone saying to other classmates, please be quiet, you're being rude, things like that. Even the people who are packing up noisily, I think they don't really like it either, because I think they recognize it's rude. I don't like it. Nobody likes it. It was rational for us as individuals, us all very good, kind people, but collectively, we don't like it at all. And so that's an example of a thing called public good that we need to act as a group to try to rectify. And there's different ways you can try to handle this. I'm guessing that in church, let me ask you, in church do you have that problem? No. It's different. A church is just different. You probably respect the priest more than me, and there's God there and everything. God's probably here. But it's different. So there you've got culture kicking in. And a lot of times you don't need government. You don't need rules. You don't need to be punished. Just culture, just social norms changes things. But that doesn't work here. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There's also just the Stalin's fist kind of thing where I yell at you and I tell you, go, get away from this class. That's not going to work. I don't want to do it. Y'all end up not like an instructor even when they act like that to other people. It just doesn't work. So that doesn't work either. So we need to find a way. And so what we're getting to is the kind of thing that economists like to do. What economists like to do is figure out little ways of changing the incentives. Changing the incentives in a way that what is rational for the individual is rational for the group. Remember the first thing we did in class is that economics was about aligning individual incentives and social incentives. That's what we're thinking about here. So we want to change something in the class that gives you the incentive to be quiet right up to the end in a way that makes you want to do that, in a way that you're not mad at me for doing it, and in a way that we can still get out early in a very orderly fashion sometimes. So this is my suggestion on how to do this. This is me just trying to change your incentives. Instead of doing clickers at the beginning of class, we do it at the end. And you don't get credit for attending unless you chime in on the last question. And furthermore, I do not go to the last question as long as there is excessive noise. See what I mean? So nobody gets any credit for being here if y'all keep making noise right up to 2020. Now, first you hear that, you think, oh my God, he's not going to do that. But I actually don't think it's going to be a problem. I think it'll end up better than before. Because everybody recognizes when the clickers come up, you already been here almost like 40 minutes. You want to make sure you get credit for it. So you're really attuned to that. I'm not going to tell you how many questions there are. So you want to be quiet. Doesn't mean you have to be perfectly silent. But you need to be able to hear me as you're going through. I'm not going to get to that last question unless everybody's silent. And if you are the one person starting to zip your bag while everybody else is trying to get that last question, I'm not going to need to say anything to you. You're going to, exactly. You're going to monitor yourself. Y'all even gang up on Muscle Man here. He gets to be a problem. Right? Even if he takes his shirt off, y'all aren't scared. You need attendance. And so in the end, I'm not gonna have to do anything. And who knows? We may even get out earlier because of that. The metaphor for this is when we have pollution, you don't go into the firm and start punishing them. You say, okay, you're going to pollute, okay, I'm just going to charge you some for it, pay for the pollution. And they say, well, I don't want to pay too much, so I'm going to pollute less. You want to try it? Of course, you know what this means. What time is it? What's that? It's not even 1 o'clock? So like if we started doing this now, you might get out of here pretty early, right? Does this mean we're always going to start doing it at 1 o'clock? You want to go ahead and try it? Do I have your permission? Never Channel 46. Remember, regular S is the old supply curve. The new supply curve could be S1 prime or S2 prime. The change, remember this is the market for wheat. The change is the price of wheat falls. If the price of wheat falls, how does the supply curve changes it? Up this way to S1, down this way to S2, not change. That's what we're talking about. That was tricky. It was tricky. This is the supply for wheat, and price is right here. So if price goes down, you're just moving along the supply curve. This S curve tells you how quantity changes in response to price. So price goes down, you're just moving down the supply curve like that. Don't feel bad if you got that wrong. I knew a lot of people did it wrong. It's kind of the only way you learn that way. This was not a tricky question. The cost of producing wheat falls, the opportunity cost. How does the supply curve? Not the price of wheat, the cost of producing wheat. Good. This most of us got it. There's two ways of kind of thinking through this. Remember, a supply curve is a marginal cost curve. Even if you don't remember what the marginal means, it's a cost curve. And up here is price. That's like dollars, right? So cost falls, the dollar amount of something falls. The dollar amount is on the y-axis. So dollar amount falling would be like going down from S to S2. Another way to think about it is you can think, well, if the cost of something falls, people will produce more, right? If price stays the same and the cost falls, people will produce more. Well, to produce more, Q's on the x-axis, so higher Q is going this way. It would be like at any price, people were producing this much, now they'll produce that much. This is the same question we had last time. You might have just thought, it looks like a force, I know we changed it. Again, this is how you think through this. If you want it, we're going from S to S prime. And then you hear the words increase in supply. How do you relate the words increase in supply to this graph? Again, just do this. Quantity is on the x-axis. Supply, quantity. Increase in quantity would be like going this way. Like taking this supply curve, shifting it to the left. Assuming you have an increase in supply from S to S prime, how does that change the equilibrium price and quantity? Perfect. You saw that we go from an old equilibrium to a new equilibrium, where price fell and quantity rose. Very good. Thank you. That's all.